Welcome to my Urgot guide, by an Urgot main for future Urgot mains. The goal of this guide is to help you avoid some mistakes and misconceptions you'll make about Urgot when you first start playing him, like I did when I first started playing him on PvE. And hopefully with the knowledge you gain from this video, you'll be able to stomp, solo queue, wreck everybody, and completely demolish with this new Urgot. So, starting off with the runes, I take movement speed quints, lethality reds, armor or health per level yellows, depending on what matchup you're against. And if you want to take him jungle or not, yes, Urgot jungle is viable, and I'll talk about that a bit later in this video. And for the glyphs, you take scaling MR. You could also take flat or scaling mana glyphs, because I have personally had some problems with early mana. But if you're good enough at mana management, I don't think it's too necessary. Now, for the reasons you take all these masteries. One, you take lethality because majority of your damage is going to be coming from Echoing Flames. Echoing Flames does max % health damage that does not scale off AD. There's flat damage that scales off AD, but the majority of the damage will be coming from that max health. So lethality is very good on Urgot. Movement speed quints, obviously, to reduce the repercussions of the self-slow on Purge. This is a personal preference. I also think you could take lethality quints if you wanted to. The seals are pretty self-explanatory, and the glyphs are also pretty self-explanatory. For masteries, this is what I personally take, obviously changing Assassin to Natural Talent if I want to go jungle. The best keystone on Urgot, hands down, and I don't recommend you go Storm Rage Surge, even though it might seem like a good choice. Fervor of Battle is the keystone you need to get on this Urgot. Fervor of Battle procs extremely fast with Purge and is a no-brainer on this champion. It is the most powerful keystone for Urgot damage-wise, and the utility on Storm Rage Surge may be nice, but I have a little remedy for that, which I'll get into now with the summoner spells. On Urgot, even if you're going top, in my opinion, you could take TP Ghost, but I think in every lane matchup, you should go Ghost Flash on Urgot. Ghost on Urgot is so extremely important, to the point where if you go jungle Urgot, you should go Smite Ghost. Ghost is extremely important on Urgot for multiple reasons. Number one, it helps eliminate the slow from Purge, which will help you trigger Echoing Flames much more efficiently, which is the most important thing to do on Urgot, is to proc Echoing Flames efficiently, because it is his major source of damage. It helps you escape ganks, because Disdain is a very bad dash, one of the worst dashes in the game mobility-wise, because of its wind-up time and short range. So you want to use Ghost to escape very bad situations for ganks, because Urgot is still vulnerable to ganks as he was before the rework. And Ghost is also very good for helping you set up ease, especially during ganks. Ghost is so good on Urgot for ganking with his E. It makes it so you run up to them, you put yourself in a position where there's no way you can miss your E. You get that over 1 second stun on the enemy, and you can also use your other spells to keep them in your range and fuck them up, because that's what Urgot is all about. I think Ghost is the most important summoner spell for Urgot, and it makes it so you don't really need to take Storm Rage Surge, so you can afford to take Fervor of Battle, which is one of the most effective ways to use Fervor of Battle, is with Urgot's Purge. I feel like new Urgot is one of the best users of Fervor of Battle. Now let's talk about what items you should get when you go into a game with Urgot. His starting items can really be anything. It can be Doran's Blade, it can be Doran's Shield, or it can be Corrupting Potion. Personally, for me, I like to go Doran's Blade, but statistically, Doran's Shield is the best option. Corrupting Potion can also help with some mana issues you may have with casting Q a lot in the laning phase with Urgot, since you will be maxing that ability and heavily relying on it to win early lane matchups. Now, actually getting into the full items with Urgot, the first item you should always get is Black Cleaver, because its Armor Shred is extremely useful for Echoing Flames' max health damage. His Rage passive is extremely helpful for W, since you're going to be proccing that rage passive every W proc, which is 3 times per second. And these stats are very good on him: CDR, AD, health, all stats that Urgot wants. This is one of the most cost-efficient items that Urgot can buy. His best item by far. Next, you want to get Frozen Mallet. Reason being, again, to help you with the W. Having that rage passive to help you speed up, that Frozen Mallet passive to help them slow down, will be extremely useful when using W. Also, the health from both Frozen Mallet and Black Cleaver will be extremely useful on Urgot because his W shield on Purge scales with 30% of his bonus health. Now, after you get Black Cleaver and Frozen Mallet, or even before you get Frozen Mallet, if you're desperate enough, you can flex almost any tank item that you might need. If you need an Adaptive Helm versus like a Heimerdinger or something like that, you need a Spear Visage for whatever reason, a Dead Man's Plate, a Righteous Glory, a Thorn Mail, any item that is tanky that you can think of that you might need, you can get it. Urgot has a very flexible build path. I feel like the only item you should rush before you get any other item is Black Cleaver. Then you're really free to get any other item. Of course, eventually getting Frozen Mallet, and the next core item that I'm going to list, Steric's Gauge. Steric's Gauge is so good on Urgot because of its passive. Its passive, when you take enough damage, you get a shield that is 75% bonus health scaling and decays over time, which is extremely big with Frozen Mallet, Steric's Gauge itself, and Black Cleaver. You're going to be having a lot of health, and then on top of the shield you already get from W, oh boy, you're going to be pretty indestructible. It gives a pretty decent amount of AD, especially since Urgot has pretty good base AD scalings. And the size increase helps the radius of his passive and makes his shotgun knees bigger and fire in a bigger radius, which is so good. And Urgot is all about getting into the middle of the fight, using E, using W, so just the passive in general helps with him a lot. And then outside of that, everything's really up to you. Death's Dance is probably one of the best damage items you can get on Urgot because it does give him a bit of defense with its bleed passive, and also you can heal a lot off of your Q, but also keep in mind that the lifesteal is reduced on it with W. So yeah, Death's Dance isn't as good on new Urgot as it was on old Urgot, but I do think it's the best pure damage item to get on Urgot. Other good damage items would maybe be more half defensive ones like GA or Maw of Malmortius, and then of course getting tanky items on Urgot is very good. I feel like getting more tank on Urgot is more beneficial than AD because, again, a big heap of his damage is coming from Echoing Flames, which has max % health damage, which is going to do majority of the damage, and it doesn't scale off anything but level. So you can really afford to get very tanky on Urgot and also still do a ton of damage. And also, Fear Beyond Death's Execute has no scaling whatsoever. They just need to be below 25%, so no AD needed there either. So you really don't need to itemize AD too much. I feel like the AD from Steric's Gauge, Black Cleaver, and Frozen Mallet is enough on its own, and maybe even if you're ahead, you can get some AD with a Maw of Malmortius or a GA, and of course you're going to get some AD from Elixir of Wrath when you eventually get that item. For boots, you'll want to get Mercury Treads or Ninja Tabby, depending on the enemy team composition. You can get Boots of Swiftness, but keep in mind that the slow resistance on Boots of Swiftness does not reduce the slow on Purge. For jungle, you'll want to get the Chilling Smite Warrior enchantment, and then after that, just copy the exact same build that I already said for lane Urgot. And finally, for elixirs, you could either go Elixir of Iron or Elixir of Wrath. Personally, I prefer Elixir of Wrath because you get the extended duration if you kill people in fights, and also it gives you healing for dealing damage. But if you feel like you need the extra tenacity and health, you can also go Elixir of Iron. It's a perfectly viable option. Now we are finally done with talking about itemization, and we can get into the meat of the video, Urgot's kit. Let's start off with talking about Urgot's bread and butter ability, Q. Yes, that's right, his bread and butter is this, not this. This is the ability you will be wanting to cast the most on Urgot. It's the ability you're going to max first, and the reason for this is because Urgot's auto attack range is abysmal. It is 350. You cannot use it to poke anyone down in lane, so you will heavily rely on Q in lane to get harassed down and be relevant in the laning phase for the early game. Also, the scalings are very nice on it. A lot of base damage. The slow scales extremely well, and it's great for wave clear. It will also be much more useful than maxing W in the early game because number 1 W scales off AD, and the shield isn't going to be extremely useful to you because in the laning phase you need to poke people down before you even consider going in, or else you will lose every trade. Next up is this W Purge, and this is probably going to be the most important part of the guide. Purge is a utility tool. You do not use Purge for DPS and damage. In the best case scenario, Purge only does more damage than your auto attacks if you are locked on to your opponent for the entire duration of Purge. Late game, this becomes very useful and Purge does become your main source of damage, but early game, it's not strong at all. It's extremely weak compared to auto attacking, and on top of that, it's all DPS. There's no burst, so it's very easy for your laning opponents to get away and not be affected at all by the Purge, especially since you are self-slowed during the cast. Now, what do you use Purge for besides proccing that shield? The reason you use Purge, and the reason I call Purge a utility tool, is that you use it to proc his passive very fast. Echoing Flames is the majority of Urgot's damage. It is his main source of damage and what you need to get good at to be a good Urgot player. Proccing his passive is so important that his entire itemization is built around reducing the effects of the self-slow on W so you can proc the passive as fast as possible. After you proc all your legs, there is no reason to keep Purge up. And you may be thinking, well, why don't I keep Purge up for the shield? Well, once you activate Purge, the shield will stay there for 4 seconds no matter what. Even if you cancel Purge early, you'll still have the shield, so you don't really need to worry about that. Sometimes if you're in a fight and you don't have your passive on for whatever reason, you can even double tap W real quick to get the shield but not have the slow and attack going on from Purge. And this is the thing that you need to get down and get in your head, because this is what made me dislike Urgot my first few times playing him on PvE, and what got me frustrated with Urgot is because I was trying to max W and make it my bread and butter ability, when honestly it has too many downsides where it has to be used as a utility tool until you are into the mid and late game and you have enough AD and enough items to make the damage on it worthwhile and to consistently lock people on with the Q and E. Also, just maxing Q is a lot better in general for early game. W is a lot better for late game because the scaling just increases the AD scaling, not the base damage of Purge. Now, the final ability, basic ability that we'll be talking about is Disdain Urgot's E. Now, Disdain has a similar thing to Purge where you may think that you need to use it as a dash. I mean, it is a dash, but when you use it, you really need to forget that it's a dash. Technically it is, but the windup takes so long that actually walking to your destination is faster than using Disdain. You need to use Disdain as a short-range CC skill shot. Never really use it for the dash. You use it for hitting the CC and the flip. That is what Disdain is for. Disdain is kind of like a mini hyperkinetic position reverser like on the old Urgot, where you used it to catch people out of position, except now it's just on a dash and has a little bit of a wind up. It's basically the same ability and functions the same way. You should hold on to it to lock people down or to flip them to the other side of you to get your Echoing Flames off from the other side of your legs. Those are the two uses for Echoing Flames. It also combos very well with Ghost, running up to people and using it at point blank range. Also, one really nice tip about the E, you can level it up first as your first ability to level up in the game. Proc your front 3 legs with Echoing Flames, then use your E to flip them to the other side and proc your back legs, and by doing that you will have a surprisingly large amount of early game damage and may be able to get a first blood. And of course, the last ability on Urgot is Fear Beyond Death, one of the best ultimates in League of Legends history. I absolutely adore this ultimate. It's so fun to use, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Just use it on your enemy when they're low, and they have a little mark on them, and you can kill them. But also keep in mind that if you think they're close enough to just need a little more damage to get the mark, but it doesn't show the mark, you can just cast it and you'll probably be able to reel them in, because Fear Beyond Death actually does a bit of damage on the initial hit of the enemy, but they don't calculate that initial hit into a 25% damage. Like, for example, they won't mark a target if they become below 25% by getting hit by the skill shot. They'll only show the mark if they are below 25%. So sometimes, even if there isn't a mark there, you can hit Fear Beyond Death and still get the reel in right away. Another tip I can use on it is that sometimes in a super hectic fight where it's late to mid-game and you know you're going to do a shitload of damage and you know the enemy's going to do a shitload of damage and you want to get them suppressed as fast as possible, you can start out with Fear Beyond Death even though they're not even close to being low enough to be reeled in. Then over the 3 seconds, do enough damage to reel them in so they can escape. Besides that, though, there is not much uniqueness to the ability. It's probably the most self-explanatory ability in his kit, and you don't really need to know anything special about it. So that's about it for his abilities. As a short recap, Echoing Flames is extremely important. You gotta get very good at proccing those. Those are gonna be the majority of Urgot's damage. Q is his bread and butter ability, super important to max early and spam onto your opponents in order to engage on them later with E and W and proc the Echoing Flames and fuck them up with all your abilities. W is not your bread and butter. You only use it as utility to proc Echoing Flames faster and get that shield off. Remember, you can deactivate it at any time during the duration, so get really good at deactivating Purge when applicable. Disdain is a piss poor dash. You should only use it for its CC purposes, not for its mobility purposes. And Fear Beyond Death is the best ultimate in League of Legends. So that's about it for the guide. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that this advice helps you kickstart your new career as a new-found Urgot main, and hopefully this new Urgot can give you as much joy as the old Urgot gave me, and I'm sure that this new Urgot will give me as well in the years to come. Thank you so much for watching. I love Urgot with a burning passion, and I hope that that passion carries over to you with this rework. I already said that. I'm super excited for this rework. That's it for this video. See you guys next time.